Hello and welcome to Pabbly Connect. So this video is going to be a complete guide on how you can integrate apps inside Pabbly Connect using Basic Auth with Access Token as the authentication method. So Pabbly Connect offers three different kind of authentication method under Basic Auth with Access Token. These are Auth 2.0 based authentication using client credentials as grant type. The second one is Auth 2.0 based authentication using password as the grant type. And the third one is custom access token generation via API. So some of the application required some API call or API request to generate the access token. We will see in this third category. So how you can integrate these three type of different authentication based application inside Pabbly Connect, we will see in this video. And all of this comes under the basic auth with access token kind of authentication method inside Pabbly Connect. So we are going to have a look on three different applications at how we have integrated those applications inside Pabbly Connect. So let's begin. Okay, so as you can see, here we are on the front-end dashboard of Pabbly Connect. Now to access the backend developers platform, just go to the URL section over here, and after connect.pabbly.com, we just have to enter /app. And here we have reached to the app integration page of Pabbly Connect. Now after reaching to this page, just click on this create new app button, give your application a name which you are integrating and click on save. So right now guys, we are looking at three different types of authentication under this category. The first one on which we are going to have a look is SendPulse. So let's search for our SendPulse. Okay, so this is SendPulse, that how we have integrated SendPulse inside Pabbly Connect. So SendPulse also use Auth 2.2 based authentication where it requires the client credentials for the authentication. The grant type is client credentials. So this category, this kind of authentication comes under basic auth with access token kind of authentication inside Pabbly Connect. So guys, after naming your application, the first thing what you have to do is to enter some basic details of the app, like the name of the application, the description of the application, that what does this application do. Then you have to upload the app logo, and the logo size should be 64 x 64 inch pixel. Then it comes one of the most important thing, and that is the auth type. So here this application SendPulse uses basic auth access response token type of authentication. So it is some kind of a auth 2.0 based authentication, but because it requires client credentials as a grant type while authenticating, that's why in Pabbly Connect we have created a separate category for that. So we have selected this kind of authentication. Now what kind of authentication method does your application uses? You can refer to the API doc of the application and refer to that and find out the authentication method. We have referred to the API doc of SendPulse, and here we found that it requires some parameters, some details like client ID and client secret like client credentials for the authentication. That's why we have selected this. So here after selecting your authentication type as basic auth, the first thing it asks us is access token URL. So this is the API endpoint, the access token URL using which we are going to make the authentication request. Then it is asking us request body type. So in the drop down below, we can see different body types over here. So whatever kind of body type your application accepts as the request, you have to select that body type. SendPulse use form data as the body type over here. After this, if your application requires some kind of HTTP headers for every API call, by selecting this, you can add those HTTP headers as well. But right now, SendPulse does not require any kind of HTTP headers for authentication, so we have ignored it. But this required some kind of body parts or parameters over here. So we have referred to the API doc of the application, and we saw that it requires three different types of parameters. And here out of all of these parameters, it requires grant type as client credentials. So we have to send these client credentials over here with this authentication method. So we have requested the client ID and client secret from the user. So by referring to the API doc, you will exactly know what kind of authentication it uses. So here we can see that we have created all of those three parameter fields over here. And by clicking on these fields, by just selecting this, you can create these fields, these parameters. And if you want to add multiple parameters, just click on this plus button over here and keep on adding required number of parameters. Now, after creating these parameters, we also have to configure them. So here you can see that there is a settings option in front of this. Just click on it, and here you can actually configure these parameters, that what you want to do using these parameters. So we have given a label name for this parameter, and that is the grant type. Just a second, grant type. And then here the default value is client underscore credentials. So by referring to API doc, we knew that we have to send the client credentials as the grant type. That's why we have entered the default value as client credentials over here. And then just click on save. After that, we have to enter or configure the client ID and client secret in the same way. Just click on the settings button. So we have given this field a label name of ID, and we have kept the default value as blank because the user will be entering their client ID over here of their SendPulse account. So whatever label name you are going to give over here, whatever text you are going to enter over here, the same text, same label name will be reflected in the front end. And in the similar way, just configure the client secret as well. So in this way, whatever parameters are required for this authentication with this access token URL, you can add those parameters over here. Now after this, it is asking us token key name received and token key name sent. Now guys, using this access token URL and these parameter details, a API call has been made. And after making that API call, in response from the application, we get the access token. The access token which we are going to use for the authentication with further API calls as well. Now guys, here we have to enter the path that in the response which we get after making this access token URL call, where we will get this access token. So here guys, you can refer to the API doc of the application as well, or you have to make this API call with this parameter details in Postman. So in response, whatever data you get, you can figure out that where you will be getting this access token. Like we have referred to the API doc of SendPulse, and here we saw that we get the access token in the root of the response. So here guys, actually in SendPulse, we get the access token in the roots. That is why we directly get the access token from the response which we get. So here guys, we will be directly entering the access token, that we will be directly picking the access token from the response. And guys, here we have to enter that where we want to send this access token as well. So wherever configuring some triggers, actions or API configuration for this application, whatever we set up, we have to enter this access underscore token, and at that location, at that path, this access token which we get from the application of our account will be sent. Now, after entering token key name, it is asking us client authentication. So in the drop-down, we have two different options. First one is send token in header, and second one is send token in body. So if your application takes the API token, the access token in the headers, select this, or if it takes the access token in body, you can select this option as well. After entering all of these details and all these basic details configuring your authentication of the application, just click on save. And you will see the step 1 of integrating this kind of application inside Pabbly Connect is completed. We have successfully entered the basic details and configured the authentication of the application which is using Basic Auth Access Token based authentication method. Now after this, let's create some actions in this application. So we will go to action section. If you want, you can also create some triggers. We have other videos as well with the step-by-step guide that how you can create triggers, actions and inbuilt actions in your application. Now here guys, let's have a look on the action first right now. So here is the action of SendPulse that it adds subscriber. So using this action, we are adding new subscribers in our SendPulse account. To create a new action, just click on this create new action button. Just give your action event a name and click on save. After naming it, we have to enter some basic details of this action event as well, like the description of the action event, that what does this action event do. Then we have to enter the video tutorial URL. So it's an optional field. If you have any kind of video tutorial that how does this action event or trigger event works inside Pabbly Connect, you can enter the video tutorial URL over here as well. Then if you want to give some kind of important help text to the user who is using this action event inside Pabbly Connect of your application, you can enter that help text over here as well. After entering basic details, just click on save. Then we'll scroll down and you will find a step named as inbuilt action details. What it is and how it works, we will see this in a couple of minutes later in this video. But first, we will scroll down and come to this action event API configuration. So here we have to set up the actual API configuration that how does this action event is going to work. So first thing which we have to select is the HTTP method. So in the drop down, we can see all the 5 methods. Select the HTTP method for which you are configuring this API endpoint. So we have selected the method. Then we have to enter the API endpoint URL using which we are going to make the API call. Select your request body type and wrap in array. Do you want to wrap this array or not? And in body type, you can select the different body types according to your application's API doc. Then, if your application requires some kind of data in headers, you can send that data as well. Like SendPulse requires HTTP headers with client ID and client secret. So we have selected this option and we have created two fields, two parameters of headers. First one is client ID and second one is client secret. And then by clicking on the settings option in front of it, you can configure this header details or configure these parameters as well. So we have given this parameter name and we are getting these details from the user, which is client ID and client secret. And both of these details, client ID and client secret, are important to make the authentication, to make the connection between SendPulse and Pabbly Connect. And after configuring it, just click on save. Follow the same process for other header steps as well. After this particular API endpoint required some kind of parameters, some kind of fields as well. So if you want your users to input some data in the front end who is using this action event of your application inside Pabbly Connect, you can create those fields over here in this set body query or path parameter field. So here you can see that it requires 4 parameters and we have created 4 different fields, 4 different parameters over here. First one is of ID, second is email, name and phone number. So this action event, this API endpoint actually adds new subscriber in my SendPulse account. So we have to enter the email address, name and phone number of the subscriber. So for that, we have created these fields, these parameters. And by clicking on this settings button in front of it, you can configure them as well. So in configuration, you have to give a label name. So whatever label name you will give over here, the same name will be reflected in the front end to the user for that particular field. Then select the field type, that what kind of field you are creating. And then here we have to select is this field is mandatory or not. After that, just enter some kind of help text that what a user is supposed to do and click on save. After that, you can basically click on this plus button and keep on adding multiple parameters. And by clicking on the settings option, you can configure those parameters as well. So here guys, these were 3 basic details. But here is the parameter named as ID. So in this API endpoint, we have to basically send the ID of the mailing list in which we want to add the subscriber. So using this API endpoint, we add a subscriber into a particular mailing list in SendPulse. So here we have to mention the list ID of that mailing list in which we want to add this subscriber. So guys, to actually use this API endpoint and use this action inside Pabbly Connect, first we have to get the complete data of all the mailing lists from SendPulse inside Pabbly Connect. And we have to show this list to the user in the front end. So whenever using this action event in the front end, the user will select from all the mailing lists they have in their SendPulse account, they will select that in which mailing list they want to add this subscriber to. For that, we have created this inbuilt action. So this inbuilt action step stays in the backend. A user in the front end won't be able to see it, but using this, we can make some API calls and get some data from the application and then use that data in the API configuration as well. Like here, you can see that I have created an inbuilt action of get all mailing list. So whenever a user will select this action event of add subscriber in SendPulse, automatically after making or after authenticating their account, this action event will take place. It will make a API call and it will get a list of all the mailing lists from my SendPulse account and show it to the user in the front end. So from the drop down, a user can select the mailing list that in which mailing list they want to add this subscriber. So how you can create inbuilt actions? Let me show you. Just scroll up and go to this inbuilt action section from the left side. And here guys, by clicking on this create inbuilt action button, you can start creating them. Just give your inbuilt action a name and click on save. Right now, the inbuilt action on which we are going to have a look is named as get all mailing list. So let's have a look on this. So here first you have to select the inbuilt action type. So here Pabbly Connect has 3 different type of inbuilt actions. First one is a drop down and custom field. Second one is the multi-step and third one is app auth validator. So you can select that what kind of inbuilt action you want to build. So I want to create a drop down and custom field based inbuilt action. Then give your inbuilt action a name and a description. And after entering these basic details, click on save. After that, in the next step, you have to set up the API configuration of this inbuilt action. That what does this inbuilt action do? And you have to follow the same process of API configuration. Refer to the API doc, get the API endpoint URL and select the HTTP method. Select the authentication type, and here guys, in authentication, you have to select the same authentication which we have set up. And while integrating your application inside Pabbly Connect by any kind of authentication method, while creating this triggers, actions and inbuilt action, you have to actually connect your account of the application inside Pabbly Connect. Just for integrating and building this application inside Pabbly Connect, it is very important to connect the account and get the responses. Like here, I have connected my SendPulse account while creating this inbuilt action. Then this API endpoint required some kind of client ID and client secret for the authentication. So we have sent these details in the path parameter. And after that, we have clicked on save and then send test request. After clicking on send test request, we have received some response, and in this response, we will get the complete data of all the mailing list in my SendPulse account. So whatever kind of API calls or API request you make in inbuilt action, it stays in the backend, but we can use this data, we can use this response from this step while integrating or while creating some triggers or actions as well. So in this way, you can create inbuilt action, and after creating this inbuilt action, to use this inbuilt action while building an action event, just go to the action event itself. And then we wanted to show this list, the complete data of all the mailing lists from the user's SendPulse account to the user. So for that, we have created this field of ID. So we have to basically configure it. So we have added this action event, inbuilt action event of get all mailing list. Just click on this settings option in front of this parameter field and then configure it. Give this a label name, whatever name you will give, it will be shown in the front end. Then you have to select this dynamic dropdown option. So right now the field, the parameter which we are creating for the front end is a dynamic dropdown, which means a user can either select the name of the mailing list from the dropdown below, which we are going to show, or they can map the mailing list ID as well. And after selecting it, in here we have two options. First one is option label and second one is option value. So in the dropdown below option label, all the responses which we have received while creating the inbuilt action, we can see all the responses of that inbuilt action which we have added of get all mailing list can be seen over here. So from all of these responses, what response or what data you want to show in the front end to the user, you have to select it. So I want to show the name of the mailing list to the user in the front end. So I will be selecting the name of the mailing list as the response in option label. And after that, in option value, in the dropdown, we can see same data, same responses of inbuilt action which we have added over here. And here we have to select that what is the data, what is the response or what is the value we want to pass in the API call. So whatever response, whatever mailing list by name a user will be selecting from here in this label option in the front end. For that, we want to send the mailing list ID to the API request. So we have selected the response of mailing list ID. So what data you want to show in the front end, that data, that response or that value should be in option label. And for that response, for that option, what is the data or what is the value you want to send in the API call? Select that in option value. Then after that, here it asks us for the field type. So in the drop down below, we can see two different type of active fields. First one is select and second one is multi-select. So here this is a select field. A user can only select one mailing list at a time. That's why we have given this option of select. Then is this field is required or not? Is it mandatory or not? Select it, enter some help text and other basic details and click on save. In this way, you can use inbuilt action and configure those inbuilt action into parameters and field as well. After entering these parameters and fields, if your application requires or requests some kind of raw JSON body with the API call as well, you can create that raw JSON body over here. If it does not require, just unselect it, but if required, you can set up or create the raw JSON body over here, like we have created for SendPulse over here. And after creating all of these details, just click on save. And then you will see that we have successfully created an action inside Pabbly Connect. So in this video till now, we have learned how you can integrate an application inside Pabbly Connect using basic auth access token based authentication, where all the auth 2.0 based application which requires client credentials as the grant type, we have learned that how we can integrate that kind of application inside Pabbly Connect and start building our triggers and actions and also inbuilt actions if needed. So after integrating this application and building this action event, let's check this action event in the front end. So we will go to the dashboard of Pabbly Connect. And after that, we'll just create a workflow. Let's example name this workflow as demo. Then here in trigger, we are not going to select, we have created an action event. So we'll directly come to action. We will search for SendPulse clone private. So this was the application name SendPulse clone on which we were working. Then let's select this action event of add subscriber. Let's select it and click on connect. And yes guys, the same way in which we have integrated this application, like we are asking for the API ID and API secret of the SendPulse account from the user for authentication, it is asking that. And after entering these details, just click on save, the user will save and their SendPulse account gets connected with Pabbly Connect. And we have in the backend, we have configured how all of this thing is going to work. So right now, we had a look at how we can send client credentials as a grant type in Auth 2.0 authentication, which comes under Basic Auth Access Token Method of authentication inside Pabbly Connect. Now guys, what if the authentication type or the grant type is password? Some application takes password as the grant type. In that case, what you can do? We have that example too. So we have an example of Access Soft. So this application takes grant type as password. So what we have done while integrating it, we have just followed the same process. The other process of building triggers, actions, and app details is same. Entered some basic details, and here in basic auth type, we have entered the access token URL. We have selected the request body type for token that was JSON, and then here in parameter, it requires all of these details. But the grant type which it requires was password. So here we have created the parameters for all of these fields, and in grant type guys, we have created a parameter of grant type. And while configuring this grant type parameter, we have entered the default value as password. So in this way, we have configured this application as well. This application also provides access token while making this access token URL call in the root. So that's why here we have automatically detected the access token. So you can refer to the API doc of your application to find out what kind of authentication type or what kind of grant type your application uses. So guys, also let me tell you, on our forum, we have complete threads that how these kind of all of these authentication methods inside Pabbly Connect works. So guys, let me take you to this thread of authentication on which we were working. That is if the grant type is password. So we have this application Microsoft on which we are having a look. So let's have a look on the API doc of this application as well. So here guys, while referring to API type, we came to know it takes all kind of these parameters. And also we saw it takes authorization code or the password as the grant type. So that's why we have created these kind of fields over here. And also while referring to it, you will find this data that the access token comes in the root. So here we have referred to the API docs. So we found that the access token which we get after making this access token URL call, we get that in the root. That's why we have entered the path of this access token in this way. And after entering these details, it also takes token in the headers. So that's why we have sent token in headers in client authentication and then clicked on save. And the rest of the process of configuring triggers and actions is absolutely the same. You can create triggers, actions, and inbuilt actions by the same process which we had a look in this video and other videos as well. Now after this, let's have a look on this application in the front end, that how does this authentication works. So here guys, let's add a new step. Let's search for this application that is Exosoft clone. So this was the same application on which we were having a look right now. Let's select an action event, for example, create contact, click on connect. And yes guys, all the parameters which we have created for authentication, we can see all of those parameters over here. And one parameter of grant type is not present over here because we have entered the default value of password for that parameter. That whatever password you are going to enter over here, the same value will be passed as the grant type as well. So in this way, guys, you can see that if your application uses Auth 2.0 based authentication and your application requires password as the grant type, how you can integrate that kind of application inside Pabbly Connect. Now, guys, let's move to the third case of today. That's the last one, that if your application generates access token via API. So for that case, we have an application named as Client Joy. So let's have a look on this first. So here, the first process is basically the same. Enter some basic details, upload the logo, and in authentication type, after selecting basic auth access response token, we have entered the access token URL and we have received this URL by referring to the API doc of this application Client Joy. Then we have selected the request body type and it requires the HTTP header of this URL of this origin, then from where this request is originating. So we have added this HTTP header as well. Then in body parameters, guys, it just required two basic things. That is the email address and the password. Basically the login credentials of the application it takes, and using those login credentials, it generates an API request and gets the access token. So we have to get the login credentials and their email address and password for this application. So we have created these two parameters over here. By clicking on the settings option, we have also configured these parameters as well. Then here guys, after entering email address and password and after submitting it in the front end, the user will get the access token by the API call. And then guys, after generating the access token, we have to here enter the path of the access token, that where we will get this access token in token key name received and in token key name sent. So here guys, in this particular application, what it is, we get the access token in the nest. Let me show you. Let me show the API doc of this application, that is client joy. Let's refer to the API doc. And here, let's go to this authentication section. And yes, here you can see that in response example, you can see the token, the access token is received in the nest. We don't get the access token like we have received in previous two application in the root in the top of the response. We have received this access token in the nest under data. So we have received this access token under this nest of data. So we have to actually enter the path of this access token over here in this field. So in this way, we have entered this part that the access token is found under data and then token. And it is the path from where we have to receive the access token. The access token which we are going to send will be sent by this value, by this name of token, by this path of token as well. So whenever while configuring or creating triggers and actions and inbuilt actions, by any point if you want to send the token, the access token, just enter this over here. After that, we have to select client authentication. So this application also takes send token in header as an authentication client authentication type, but it also requires some kind of raw JSON body for the API call for the authentication. So that is why we have also created this JSON body over here. So in this JSON body, we have to pass the email address and the password as the user details with this access token URL. And guys, using these details, a new access token will be generated and we can find that access token in the response by going to this path. And then just click on save. The rest of the process for this application is also stays the same process for building triggers, actions, authentication, and inbuilt actions as well. So in this way, guys, this video is completed where we have understood how the basic auth access response token based authentication of Pabbly Connect works. So in this authentication method of Pabbly Connect, you can basically integrate applications which are based on Auth 2.0 based authentication and requires password or client credentials as the grant type. Also, if your application generates the access token by API, you can integrate your application in the same authentication method inside Pabbly Connect. So guys, after all of this, let's have a look on this application also in the front end. We'll go to our front end workflow which we have created. Let's add another step and have a look on client joy. This is client joy clone on which we were having a look. Let's select any action event, for example this, and click on connect. And yes guys, we have created two parameters of email ID and password, and it is only asking us for this for the authentication. By entering the email ID and password of our client joy account, we can authenticate or connect this account inside Pabbly Connect. So in this way guys, you can use all these three kind of authentication method to integrate your app inside Pabbly Connect. Now guys, one important thing, if you are directly from the app integration team which you are integrating, you can actually integrate your application and submit it for approval. And once your application gets approved by the Pabbly Connect team, this application will be publicly accessible on the Pabbly Connect platform. But if you are not from the app integration team, but somehow you have integrated an app inside Pabbly Connect, you can actually share your application privately with other users as well. Just go to this sharing section over here and then start sharing your application privately with other users. So I hope this video was helpful to you guys. If you like this video, don't forget to hit the like button. If you have any kind of doubts or queries, write us in the comment box below. So this is it for today's video guys. Thank you. Have a great day.